Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back to my channel. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer with you today. Okay, guys, so today I just want to do a small update on the month of November. We've got the new moon coming up tomorrow, well, today and tomorrow, depending on where you are in the cosmos, but 7th and 8th of November, really. So today is the 7th of November. I'm a little bit late in sharing this with you guys. It's been a very intense couple of days here in Melbourne, where I'm from, in Australia. So I want to start off talking about that before I go into just all the incredible planetary energy shifts that are going on this month, really. There's so much going on. Now, yesterday we have an event that takes place every year here in Melbourne, which unfortunately is a really terrible event for animals and horses in particular. It's a horse racing event that takes place every year at this time. And it's a really cruel industry, a very greedy industry that needs to stop. We need to find ways to have this stop altogether. So many horses have died as a result of this horse racing. Now, yesterday I woke up and Melbourne weather yesterday was incredibly chaotic and bizarre. You know, this time of the year we're into summer here, but Melbourne, for those of you that don't know, is very, very unpredictable in terms of its weather. Melbourne's ruled by Mercury, hence why the weather is always changing. Changing, I mean like 10 times in a day. So yesterday we had really very strong rains. There was floods in certain parts of this city. There was just very heavy pour down of rain. And naturally this made the track that the horses were going to be riding on incredibly difficult. You know, there would have been thick mud and, you know, loads of water and all sorts of crap. And I woke up and I saw the day and it felt really gloomy. Something just didn't feel right. And I don't like that particular day that's celebrated every year. It's just, it's so pretentious and so superficial and just dominated by greed. And they just throw in this whole fashion sort of component to this event in order to obviously draw all the women into it, which attracts all the men. So it's just an absolute phony, bogus event that people go and basically bet on these poor, beautiful horses that suffer tremendously through injuries and then ultimately through death. So long story short, yesterday what happened was that one of the main horses in the main event actually did die. He was only 5 years old. He was a beautiful horse. And while he was in the race and racing, he tripped, or I'm not sure of the exact details. I didn't watch it. I just saw it come up on the news later. Actually, I saw it come up through social media and newsfeed. I don't actually watch the news. He smashed his shoulder so badly. His injuries were so severe that they actually put him down and killed him. That really, really upset me, really disturbed me, and I know that it upset a lot of people, especially here in Melbourne. I've got a lot of friends on my Facebook who are advocates for animals in a number of different ways, whether they're vegan, vegetarian, whether they just work with animals, you know, a number of different strains of communities and people. So there's been incredible sort of uproar and upset in a lot of communities here in Melbourne. It was a very, very sad day, actually, and I thought, wow, gee, let me see what's going on with the astrology. So I did have a look at the chart for the time that the race was on, and the chart's actually pretty descriptive of what actually happened. Now, when it comes to gambling, we look at the 5th house of the astrological birth chart. when it comes to large animals, we look to the 12th house of the astrological birth chart. Now, yesterday, when this event took place, the moon was still in Libra. So it's just before a new moon in Scorpio. And the moon was in what's called the balsamic phase. The balsamic phase is always about endings, basically. It's a very, very, very difficult phase if you're born into it, or if you experience it at some stage through your secondary progressed moon. It's not an easy period to go through, or it's not an easy phase to be born into. But in terms of what it represented for this chart was, well, the moon just spoke of something really fated actually ending. Now, the balsamic phase can also describe fated events and fated connections that we make as well. The ruler to the fifth house was the moon, fifth house being gambling, and the moon was in the eighth house, the Scorpio house, the house of death. And Saturn, being the ruler of the 12th house, as we know, Saturn is in Capricorn, and it was very elevated in the chart up there in the 10th house, which really represented or reflected the fact that this event is it's such a corporate event. You know, it's ruled by Saturn. It's a highly corporate event that's controlled and regulated by a bunch of greedy people, basically. So all the symbolism was there. Neptune was in the 12th as well. Anyway, that's pretty much the symbolism for the chart of when this horse, this beautiful poor being, sentient being, his life was ended short simply because of how greedy people are on this planet. And that's a sad truth that exists everywhere. And I know that there are animals being slaughtered and tortured, and their lives made short on a number of different levels, whether it's through those insane people that kill animals for trophies, or whether it's just simply the slaughter of animals for man to actually eat. Now, I am an advocate for animals as well, and some of you may or may not be, but I hope you can at least respect my perspective and my view. I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong. I'm just simply saying that this is how I feel, and this is my view, and that I feel that part of my role on this earth, apart from being an astrologer and a counselor and helping people on their journey, I'm also here to speak up for animals. You know, I'm here to protect them as much as they are here to protect me. You know, I've got a cat that I've had for 8 years now, and she's the love of my life apart from my father. And she's been an incredible protector for me in ways that I couldn't even begin to explain to you in this short video. So anyway, needless to say, I'm incredibly fond of the animal kingdom and have great reverence and respect, and a lot of empathy and compassion and love for all animals, actually. So anyway, that's that. And so it has been a pretty heavy couple of days here with what's happened, and I am aware that there are a lot of other really big things going on, you know, collectively in the world in pretty harsh, tragic ways, with floods and fires and people dying, and, you know, all sorts of terrible things are still going on. I'm aware of that. But I'd like to say that there are also a lot of incredibly powerful and beautiful things going on as a collective, and also individually. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of people that will go out of their way to be kind to somebody and to help somebody and to offer their time and energy and ear to somebody. You know, sometimes the best thing you can offer somebody is just a space that they can enter where they can speak and you just listen. That is one of the greatest gifts that you can give to somebody. A lot of us don't have the ability to just listen. You know, we can talk and talk and talk, but when it comes to being silent and giving that space to another, a lot of people really struggle with that. And there are certain signs that struggle with that more, and there are other signs that have greater abilities with that as well. namely the water signs, generally tend to be so incredibly compassionate and empathetic and sympathetic. So therefore, they usually have a greater ability to listen and to go into that space with another. And I think that's really important. And that really does lead us into this new moon in Scorpio that begins today and tomorrow, depending on where you are on the planet. This new moon in Scorpio is at 15 degrees. And the Sabian symbol, I love looking at Sabian symbols for a number of different things, but especially for full moons and new moons. And I did read the Sabian symbol, and it's quite interesting. It's actually quite optimistic. So it's not as dark as perhaps we might expect with the moon in Scorpio. Now, yes, it is a new moon, and yes, it is in Scorpio. So it has that inherent intensity and depth to it because it is Scorpio. We can never take that away from Scorpio, regardless of anything, any other lens we are adding into the delineation of this new moon, for instance. But it is important, I think, to recognize and listen to this Sabian symbol. And so it's the 16th degree that we look at. And there's the book that I'm using. I've showed you guys this book previously. So, okay, the heading for it is A Girl's Face Breaking into a Smile. That's a really lovely image, if we can just pause and just absorb that and take that in for a moment, because a smile is such a beautiful gift, very, very simply put. If you're having a really shitty day, a really, hard day, and someone smiles at you, through their heart, with an open heart, that immediately, will help you release some of that stress or some of that pain, just that beautiful smile that somebody can give you. So a smile is incredibly powerful, is what I'm trying to say. The keynote is the fervent reaching out on the part of the young of heart to new experiences. So this new moon is reflecting very new experiences coming in, moving into this month ahead for us. There are some other energies that not necessarily contradict that, but have sort of the opposite message, just purely from where those planetary energies are and where they're moving. And I'll talk about those in a moment. But I would just like to read the actual meaning to this Sabian symbol. So he says here, faith in life and in other human beings enables us to go forth toward relationships with whatever attracts our senses or stirs our imaginations. Smiling is perhaps a uniquely human characteristic because it implies a conscious acceptance of relationship, thus a choice. The animal, on the other hand, is compelled by unconscious instinct. At least in its natural state, it is not free to choose between love and hate. It's so true. Animals don't have the conceptual mental sphere that human beings have. Animals just operate from instinct and a pure stream of consciousness. So they don't have this love-hate kind of, they're very strong words, I know, but this human beings can decide to hate somebody and can decide to love somebody, so that's what this is pointing out. So deciding to smile is a choice, and it's something that you're giving to another as well. And then finally, he just says, this is the first symbol of the 46 fivefold sequence. It introduces us to a series of responses to human experience and pictures a glowing warmth of feeling. So there's something very, very important about this new moon that holds the energy of kindness and giving, and that could just merely be through a smile that you give to somebody, just to put it very simply. Naturally, there are, a ton of things we can do to extend some kindness to anybody, to a total stranger, to a homeless person, to communities, to our family members, to loved ones, relationships, friendships, you know, whoever. It's about giving something, you know. And the fact is this, that when we give with our open heart, when we truly give from that real genuine space within us, not from a fake superficial conditioned giving, because there's a lot of that goes around all the time. When you give something to somebody, you give it and you let it go. You don't wait for something in return, and you don't wait to get some kind of validation or whatever the case. Giving is simply a gesture of giving from your heart, and that's what this new moon is talking about. And obviously, because it's in Scorpio, it's giving something that comes from very deep within us, something that resonates very intensely, that we have very strong feelings associated with this element of ourselves that we're willing to give to another, you know. So this new moon is very powerful from that perspective. So it is a new moon again, so it does describe the beginning, the emergence of something new, but it is connected to that Scorpio energy, and it is connected to that Sabian symbol that I read, which is all about giving from a deeper part from within yourself, as opposed to a superficial part where there are expectations or strings attached or conditional giving, because that is not true giving. Okay, now this is the last new moon for 2018 in a fixed water sign, so it's pretty important on that level as well. Now, moving on, as we know, Venus has retrograded back into the sign of Libra. She started her journey into Scorpio. She went retrograde in Libra, and she's going to go direct on the 16th of November. Now, I think while she's going back into Libra, because that's her natural domain, her natural energy, where she really shines and resonates and connects, it's her own natural sign and domain, as I said. This retrograde period takes us back clearly into the realm of relationships. And it's not only a reassessing period, you know, the retrograde period is often associated with not acting on things or reflecting, reevaluating things and so forth. But one thing that fails to get mentioned, which is my understanding through my own work and you know, things I've read over the years as well, and I've seen it in my own life. In fact, something happened to me very personally when the day that Venus went retrograde, which was just a few days ago. Retrograde in retrograde in Libra. Something sort of came up in my own life that was it was completed. It took that next step that it needed to take. And this is the thing about when planets go retrograde. What can happen is, whatever the planet is, and therefore whatever it's connecting to in your life, in the case of Venus, it's got to do with money, it's got to do with relationships, and clearly it's got to do with harmony and balance and values and worth, all those things as well. But the matters of money and relationships are really prominent when it comes to Venus, especially when she's in her own sign as well. So as she's going retrograde, you know, for many of you, you will probably find that things that you've been working on and working through with regards to money matters and relationships, you might have started something, could be a business venture. You might have invested some money into something. You might have created something that takes some time for the foundations to kind of, you know, be accepted and sort of sink in and set the stage for the next part of whatever it is you've created. It can be matters in relationships where there's been you know, Venus in Scorpio gave us that taste of what it's like to, you know, to go deeper into what we really appreciate about another, and what we really appreciate about ourselves from a very deep feeling level. So really kind of forcing us to examine the depths of Venus. Which, now, Venus in Scorpio is not, you know, the greatest place, because she's in detriment there. So it's going to bring up some things that are not easy to manage and to sort of face. But we have to experience that, because Venus goes into Scorpio, you know, every time she goes into Scorpio, this is what happens. So as she's going retrograde into Libra, you probably will find that loose ends will now start to kind of come together. The next step in things will reveal itself to you. You'll be able to take that next step. So things will be, there'll be kind of, you could say, an action out of your control, as it were, just shows up where things can just fall into place. And yeah, loose ends get tied up and things can take that next step. This is what Venus in Libra, going retrograde in Libra, is going to do for us. And it's all matters around relationship and money. Now, the day that Venus goes direct, which is on the 16th of November, which is in, 10 days' time or thereabouts, Mercury goes retrograde. So, we have one planet going direct, one planet going retrograde, and both these planets are personal planets. So there's a strong personal impact when it comes to these personal planets. When we're talking about the outer planets, we can take the understanding and perspective that there's a larger picture or cause or meaning that's playing out collectively, but also the outer planets do have a very personal effect on us as well. But when it comes to the personal planets, the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, those planets, when they're in their retrograde direct motion, all those things that they're doing, they are having a very specific direct impact on you, right? So obviously it's always going to come back to, identifying where is this Venus retrograde in your chart, where is this Mercury retrograde going to be in your chart. In other words, where's Sagittarius in your chart, where is Scorpio Libra in your chart. So now Mercury recently went into Sagittarius, which is great. There's a lot of wonderful things about Mercury going into Sag, because we kind of had enough of that. There's been a lot of Scorpio energy, and we've still got a lot going on because the Sun is still in Scorpio. It's only midway. So we've still got a couple of weeks left of some pretty intense sort of Scorpio energy. And then, Venus, she's going to go direct on the 16th of November, and she's got to go back into Scorpio. She's not going to be happy there because Venus doesn't like Scorpio. It's just too intense for her. Now, sorry to all you Venus and Scorpios. Much love. I don't mean it in a bad way. Just talking astrologically. Venus and Scorpio people love their Venus and Scorpio. Some don't, but a lot do. Anyway, so we've had a lot of Scorpio energy, which is why in my previous video, when I talked about Mercury moving into Sagittarius, to me that felt like, such a beautiful change and such a powerful contrast from the murky underworld Scorpio energy to the expansive Sagittarius, shooting our arrow, as it were, which is, our right brain, reaching for higher thoughts and understandings and expansion of consciousness. So from that point of view, Mercury in Sagittarius is fantastic. It is a mutable sign, and it is also in detriment. That's one thing that I think we probably need to acknowledge. Now, when Mercury goes retrograde later this month, which is on the around about 17th of November, Mercury will be retrograde for a couple of weeks there. Goes retrograde on the 17th and then goes direct on the 17th of November and goes direct on the 7th of December. So we've got, about 3 weeks of Mercury there being retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius. Now, we know that the Mercury retrograde period can really mess a lot of things up when it comes to communication, contracts, anything to do with the written or spoken word, essentially. There's always delays and, computers crash, and there's miscommunication that goes on between people, whether it's in a personal or professional relationship. These things are very, very typical. We're used to this. Mercury goes retrograde fairly frequently. It's not unfamiliar to us. But I think in Sagittarius, because it's in detriment, what might kind of be stirred up, you could say, is that, Sagittarius is the sign of the truth seeker. Mercury is a left brain planet. Mercury does well in Gemini. It rules Gemini. So Mercury struggles quite a bit when he's in the sign of Sag. Sag is going in one direction and Mercury is going in another almost. So what can happen is when Mercury goes retrograde, there can be a lot of apparent truths that get, they shoot out of people's mouths. It's Sagittarius is the sign, at its worst, because every sign has its most beautiful, illuminating, inherent, essential expressions, but it also has its darker side. That's just a fact. It's not a choice. It's not a decision. It's just a fact. So Mercury in Sagittarius can be that foot in mouth problem. It can be because Mercury in Sag is wanting to share truths and speak their truths and shoot them out like arrows. And with the retrograde period there, that can cause a few problems. So I'm just putting it out there to kind of give you guys the heads up, from the 17th of November to the 7th of December, just be very aware and very mindful of what it is you're actually saying to people, to your loved ones or anybody else in your life, really. And what is it that others are saying to you as well? Things can get so twisted and so out of context and so blown out of proportion because, Sag is that energy that just expands everything, it just makes everything so much bigger and sometimes so much bigger than it actually is. So there can be, big conversations that take place where arrows are getting sort of darted all over the shop and people can get hurt, right? So we've just got to be very careful about that. Also, obviously, all matters to do with the usual drill, contracts, signing things, agreeing to things, any written or verbal agreement made during a Mercury retrograde period is bound to have some issues or hiccups that'll show up, and particularly when Mercury is in Sag because it's in detriment. And what can happen is people can overshoot a truth, and the other person hears what that person has said in a totally different way, and the person who overshot that truth didn't have the intention of wanting to deceive another or anything like that or blow things out of proportion. But that's what happens because when Mercury is retrograde, we cannot really mentally assess things as they actually are. And just keep in mind the Sag component that can really be the foot in mouth problem and really blow things out of context. So, if there's some issues going on in your own life when it comes to if you've had an argument with a friend or a family member or some sort of disagreement or whatever the case, don't look to to try and rectify it and clear it up during this time when Mercury is retrograde, because it's probably going to be blown out of context even further, exaggerated even more, made a bigger problem than it actually is. And obviously all of that can only lead to more conflict and more problems. So wait until after the 7th of December. If something does pop up that's a little bit, a bit messy and that needs a bit of cleaning, when it comes to the exchange of, information, knowledge, when it comes to just having a general chit chat, with one of your buddies, whatever the case may be. So, as I said, the day that Mercury goes retrograde, Venus goes direct. So we'll be looking forward to Venus going direct. But on the other hand, it's also, as I said, it's the retrograde period for Venus can be really, really beneficial for many of you. It can really help cement things and put things in place and take you to that next level when it comes to matters of money and relationships. So just be very receptive to that and be appreciative of what shows up for you, Venus rules gifts. So gifts come in many different forms. As I said, earlier, a smile is a gift, right? So there are many different ways of understanding what a gift may be, and Venus rules gifts. So just be open and receptive to what can come to you, over these next couple of weeks before Venus then goes direct on the 16th of November at 25 degrees of Libra. And obviously then she makes her journey back into Scorpio. So we've got to deal with her being in Scorpio. I was just going to say that I think this new moon in Scorpio, will somehow tie into that, Venus going back into Scorpio. So we've still got more shit to clear out, if I can be quite frank. We've still got stuff that's lurking down there that a lot of us are not prepared to actually really look at. There's, it's the darker shadow stuff of ourselves, right? It's the darker shadow stuff of that goes on in our personal world of relationships. That's, Venus and Scorpio, that's what she does. She's going to uncover all these layers of what's been hidden, and you could say whatever's been hidden will eventually be exposed, because that's just what Scorpio does. What else do we have going? So in a couple of days' time, as I've done a couple of videos on this, so I won't really elaborate on it, but just to add to this chart that I can show you in a moment, actually. So I've just made a couple of notes from the chart of today, which is the new moon in Scorpio. So we have Jupiter going into Sagittarius. Yay. That's just going to be fantastic. I don't need to talk about that. I've done 3 videos. I've done a video just on Jupiter and Sag, and I've done 2 videos on Jupiter through every single house in your birth chart. So please go back to the previous videos if you want to understand more about this Jupiter and Sagittarius energy. But certainly it's going to be just such a beautiful, powerful, exciting, expansive energy that's really going to bring, I think, a lot of blessings and growth to people. So that kicks in a couple of days, and so there's more Sag there. We've got Mercury in Sag, Jupiter in Sag. Venus will get back into Scorpio. The Sun is in Scorpio. So we've got a mixture now of fire and water, very, very strong. The other thing that happened today, actually, at 5 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, was actually 4:59 a.m. to be precise. Uranus went into Aries. Now, there are a lot of people complaining about that, and there are a lot of people happy about that. That's the case with all the energies. It just depends how it resonates with you in your life, and therefore what it reflects and what it points to and what it brings up. The Librans are not too happy from what I can see on my social media pages when I posted something about this today. And it was all sort of suggested in fun and in jest. So it's not like this person's angry. They're just, they're like, all right, enough already. Can we have Uranus just stay in Taurus? Well, this is the thing. Uranus, he has not completed what he needed to do in Aries. That's why he's gone back. So, and again, I'd like you to think about this principle when a planet does go retrograde. I'm sorry. Yes, it is a time to revisit things, to reevaluate, to relook at things, re-examine things, all of that. But it can also be a really powerful time for things to actually happen during that retrograde period. So this is the last time that Uranus goes back into Aries. So it's his final goodbye. It's his final showdown, right? So Uranus goes as far back as 28 degrees of Aries, which is right on my sun. So I've had transiting Uranus conjunct my sun and Mercury for the past 18 months or so, which for me has been, well, it's been bittersweet, if I can put it that way. In terms of my craft, my astrological work, it's been sweet. It's been magnificent. In terms of my intuition, it's been, sensational. My intuition has it's just taken a whole new level, even in my astrological consultations and work. I'm absolutely loving it. Having Uranus on your Mercury and on your sun is conjunct. It's a pretty powerful transit to have. I'll only have that once in my life. I'll never have it again. So, yeah. Okay, now, where was I with this? Oh, that's right. So Uranus goes right back to 28 degrees of Aries, as I said, and it doesn't go direct until the 7th of January 2019. So really what we're looking at is pretty much all of November, December, and the first week of January. So we've got, just over 2 months of Uranus going into Aries and doing his final showdown, his final ticking the boxes of whatever needs to happen there, the final dance, you could say. So naturally, if you're an Aries and your Sun or Mercury would have to be very late because it only goes back to 28 degrees of Aries. Or if you're a Libran, then it's clearly going to be opposite your Sun and Mercury. Or you might have Venus in Aries, or you might have Mars in Aries. Oh, that light reflection was weird. Any of the personal planets, if you have them at 28 degrees of the cardinal signs, and the cardinal signs being Aries, Cancer, Libra, and did I say them? Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. That's right. So those are the 4 cardinal signs. So if you've got planets at the late degrees of any of those 4 signs, 28 degrees, then you're still in the midst of Uranus creating either havoc or, havoc turns into change anyway. But, the thing is with Uranus energy, if the minute we try to resist the energy or control it creates chaos in our life, you can't control Uranus energy. You've just got to roll with it. You've got to open yourself up, roll with it, and allow it to wake you up to whatever it's trying to wake you up to, because that's what Uranus does. He's the awakener, period. So it's very much about your individuation process. It's very much about deconditioning. It's very much about, letting go of old ways and thoughts and habits and ways of being and old places of living in and, going to the same place all the time, whatever the case may be. All those elements of life, are really shaken up when it comes to Uranus touching one of those personal planets. So for those of you, which is myself and many of you, I'm sure, who have cardinal planets at the 28-degree mark, you've still got a couple of months left of Uranus impacting your life, really. And I think what's going to happen is this, because when it comes to these outer planets forming I guess what I would consider the more traditional aspects, such as the conjunction, square, and opposition. Mainly those three. I mean, you can throw in trine and sextile as well. They're the 5 traditional aspects. But for the purposes of what I'm about to describe now, because trine and sextiles, they can bring about change. Sextiles bring about opportunities, and trines can just really harmonize whatever it is, you know, that's described by the planets being trine each other. But when it comes to the square, conjunction, and opposition, those aspects are incredibly dynamic. I've said that many times before. They are so dynamic, and it's that dynamic force and energy that forces change. You know, change is wonderful, but if you're not ready for it, it can be absolutely terrifying. So it depends on you, and it depends where you're at. Now, with transiting Uranus going back into Aries, making his final visit there, this is saying, really, this is what you need to look at. What's been happening over the past, you know, say 14, 15 months or thereabouts, 16 months in your life relating to Uranus. So what has Uranus tried to smash out of your life? What has Uranus tried to awaken in you? What are the structures that have crumbled? Whether it's been relationships, whether it's been professions, jobs, whether it's been where you live, home environment. It can hit any of those areas depending on where it is in your chart and which planet it's actually aspecting as well. So what happens is, over this 18-month period, is there's a beginning point of this transit, which, you know, hits, it hit about 15, 16 months ago. That first hit was it was the birth of that transit, the birth of experiencing Uranus impacting any of your cardinal planets at 28 degrees or thereabouts. So the birthing of something begins that's incredibly powerful, and then things kind of settle down and quieten down a little bit, and then suddenly in the middle there somewhere, because what happens is Uranus moves direct, and all of a sudden it goes retrograde. When it goes retrograde, then things get kind of stirred up even more. That stationary retrograde period, those dates are very powerful. Now, we've been through all of that, and we've just now come back to the final retrograde period, which is, you could say, it's literally the absolute closure of this 18-month period of what's been happening in your life. So it's the finalization. This is where you will actually now see evidence of new things actually taking form, or new things that you are being liberated from and freed up from in ways that, you know, you've never experienced before, really. So it's the final closure time. It's a very, very powerful time the next couple of months with Uranus in Aries. And, you know, Uranus is all about breakthroughs. It's the energy that brings about breakthroughs. And Aries is such a pioneering energy and sign. If we want to talk about Aries, we can certainly talk about Libra and Capricorn and Cancer as well, the other cardinal signs. So depending on which of those signs you have planets in, will obviously describe what Uranus is doing to you, to your life, to your chart. But in terms of Uranus being in Aries, then we're really talking about breakthroughs in groundbreaking initiative energy. So it's the final opportunity, if you like, the final space and time and energy to really get that courage, you know, that true sort of warrior courage, spirit energy, if you like, to actually break through and smash through some pretty old stuck types of behaviors or conditions, conditional thoughts or behaviors or ways of being. So it's a really beautiful, beautiful period, actually, I think. So that's what Uranus is doing in short. Naturally, you know, you'd be better off having an actual reading to understand it from a much deeper level and from a more specific level as well. Now, what else do we have? Well, this is not happening until next year, so, you know, I don't think I'll touch on that now. It's really about, oh, no, yeah, I've just remembered something. Massive, massive change. I haven't made a note of it, but it's okay. I can remember it in my head. I've got the note floating around in my stream of consciousness somewhere. Okay, so the nodes, the moon's nodes, the south node and the north node have just changed signs. Now, this happens every 18 months or so, and we're just at that period now where they have just changed signs. So we've had them in Leo and Aquarius for the last 18 months, and I can tell you that's been it's been pretty life-changing for so many people, including myself. Leo Aquarius is a very strong axis for me in my own chart. I have my rising sign is in Aquarius, I have moon in Aquarius, I have my north node in Aquarius. Yeah, so anyway, I know that through the conversations I've had, things I've read in terms of what people share and so forth, the readings I've done, there's been, you know, tremendous life shifts for people the past 18 months, and they actually haven't been easy at all. And obviously that has got to do with the eclipses that we had all this year as well. Now, the nodes have just gone into the sign of Cancer and Capricorn because the nodes move backwards in the zodiac. So the next axis that we're looking at before Leo Aquarius is Cancer Capricorn. So, you know, this is really a collective shift that we're looking at. And this will be an influence that we're going to have, and we're going to see how that unfolds and how that impacts the collective over the next 18 months, really. I think I'd like to do a video just on that alone. So I wanted to not make this video very, very long, but I did want to point out that the nodes literally just changed signs today, 7th of November. So they're at 0 of Capricorn and 0 of Cancer. You know, and really, in short, what are we talking about when we're talking about the nodes in those signs? It's all about family, and it's all about authority as well. And not only just the external authority, but it's our own internal inner authority. So, yes, I think there's a lot to say about that, so I might just leave that for a video unto itself. By the way, just another interesting thing that's going on. Sorry, I live in a very, very busy area, as I've said many times before. The 16th of November, you know, there's a lot of shift, really. I've already been through it, so I'm not going to go through it again. But just to add to everything I've been through with regards to that period of November, we've got Mercury going retrograde, we've got Venus going direct, and we've got Mars moving into the sign of Pisces. So there's a lot of energetic shift going on, a lot of movement, and a lot of things really finalizing and clearing up as well. Mars in Pisces is going to be pretty cool, I think. I'm actually really looking forward to that. But I would like to wait, and actually, if you can just bear with me, I will just have a look at something. Just want to check something out with Mars, and I know you can't see my screen. There's just no need really for what I'm looking at, so just bear with me. So 16th of November. Yeah, okay, so I just want to see how, what Mars is doing when he enters Pisces. So I've just animated a chart and I'm just flicking around. And yeah, I just wanted to see what was happening with Mars in Pisces. And he just goes all the way through the sign of Pisces and then goes into Aries, 2nd of January. So, okay, I think I'd like to just reflect a little bit on Mars in Pisces and what that is likely to bring up in terms of the chart for when Mars goes into Pisces and what that looks like and what that reflects and what that connects to with the planetary energies. So I might do another video on that later on. I think I've covered most of what I've wanted to say. So primary message, new moon in Scorpio. It's not just about probing and getting obsessive about things. It's about really just trying to open our heart and actually give perhaps a part of ourselves that comes from a deeper place, that is not that easily seen or offered, but maybe this new moon can help us do that. And certainly with all this Sagittarius energy coming up, well, we have Mercury in Sag already, and Jupiter goes into Sag, in a couple of days' time. People will generally feel more enthusiastic and optimistic and uplifted because that's the nature of Sag. And Uranus back in Aries, another fire sign, so there's a fair bit of fire going on. But moon in Scorpio, it's because it's a new moon, it is planting, a new beginning. And perhaps what you can take out of this is, where is this new moon in Scorpio in your own birth chart? And that area of your birth chart where that new moon lands, perhaps that is the area in your life where you need to try to open your heart more and give more from a deeper part of you. Because let's face it, a lot of people like to hide who they are. We all wear a mask, so people don't like to open themselves up and feel vulnerable or exposed. But Scorpio exposes the false. That's what it does. And because of the Sabian symbol message, it's kind of like saying, open your heart, remove those masks that make you feel safe and secure, if you like. Open your heart up to be more generous and more giving from a deeper part of you. If we don't do these things, then we just become more and more divided in this world. There's so much going on energetically and collectively and from ascension planes and levels. There's dimensions that people are so strongly working with and linked to already right now in their life, in their consciousness. I'm one of them. I do connect to other dimensions other than this one. And the way I do it is through certain practices, and that does reflect certain experiences that manifest literally in my life and what happens. So it's not all doom and gloom is what I'm trying to say. There appears to be a lot of doom and gloom, and on the one hand there is, but on the other hand there's also tremendous light that keeps smashing through, that keeps coming through. That keeps coming through into the consciousness of the masses. Look, let's face it, 20 years ago, if you were around or if you were old enough to remember, there was no word of being a vegan. There was nothing of that was around. just the amazing things that people are doing now. You know, the exposure of the darkness is so in our faces because of social media. And on the one hand, it's very powerful whichever way you look at it. But on the one hand, we need to kind of protect ourselves from that as well, because it can be very, very draining on your energy, especially if you're an empath, you know, a really sensitive, compassionate person. It can really, really impact you and weigh you down. It certainly does me. Like I said at the beginning of this video, that event yesterday, which might not have fazed other people, it really hurt my heart. Like, it really, really hurt my heart. You know, I was just looking at this horse, I was looking at his picture, and I was just thinking about what happened to him, how it happened. And I was just immersed in that all day. And it was so painful. It was so sad. I couldn't shake it off. And that's where I need to be careful when it comes to absorbing things like that, because it throws out my whole day, really. Not that there's anything wrong with that necessarily, because to express some feelings and some emotion and some sadness and some pain is not a bad thing. It's just that it's not easy, you know, which is why most people avoid it. And the way to avoid it is through addictions. And now there are many forms of addictions, many, many forms. That's a whole other conversation. So where was I going with this? I think I was just trying to summarize about this new Scorpio moon, bringing up elements that perhaps have been hidden, diving deeper into our feelings and finding a way to give and to share a deeper part of ourselves with others. Like the Sabian symbol said, with all others. Obviously, we need to have boundaries as well, right? I'm not completely unaware of that. In fact, I'm very aware of that because of the work I do, and I absolutely have to have that in check and in place all the time. Okay, leaving it there for today, and I'll be back soon with another video on something. Might be the nodes, might be Mars in Pisces, might be something just totally different. I don't know. We'll see. Okay. All right. So thank you to all new subscribers, and thank you to old subscribers. Thank you for your comments and questions. Please keep them coming. Please subscribe if you haven't. I appreciate all the love and support. And I offer my love and blessings back to you in just through energy and vibration. And if you're interested in having your own personal reading, if you need your chart rectified, if you want a forecast reading or relocation, relationship, career path, soul path, creativity, you know, whatever. There's so many different elements to astrology. There's so many different ways of looking at things. So I'm here for all of that, and here to assist you in your journey of awakening or your journey through the transitions you may be going through. Thanks so much for watching. Much love and blessings, and see you soon, guys. Bye.